Hi, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good break. You might have heard this, but as we were chatting, we were just joking about like what other things can get diabetes. So we're just asking if an alligator was fed too many marshmallows, would it get diabetes? And the answer is I have no idea. um, but some of the questions just before we get started again. So someone had asked, is Ozempic bad? And I think that's a really interesting question. One, I'm not supported by their drug rep. If I was being paid to advertise them, first of all, I would be asking for a lot of money because the Ozempic people who make Ozempic make a lot of money. But I think it's a very effective drug. On the market, in terms of the information we have, it is the most effective. It has really good stats about how much it decreases people's hemoglobin A1C. Remember that blood test I was telling you about, the 3 month average? Did you lose internet? Okay, we're still good?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, in and of itself, I don't think it's a bad drug. I think it's probably the most effective one that we have available. It's more if the side effects are tolerable to you. So people who are on Ozempic often have like stomach pain. They might have bowel issues. They might feel super super nauseous. But um, the when they were doing the trials, but tons of people lose weight. And like I was saying, when people lose weight, especially visceral fat, which is the fat that surrounds your organs, when you lose that actually decreases your insulin resistance. So Ozempic is helpful for weight loss, and it controls your sugar. So there's a lot of patients that I have where we were able to get off most of their meds and just use Ozempic, which is a once a week injection, in order to manage their sugars. So I'm not one to say if Ozempic is good or bad, but I will say it's quite effective. And there are a lot of patients where we've started and they've, really been able to transition, not have as much medication burden where they're taking a bunch of pills for diabetes, right? It'd be nice to consolidate it into one. So I think it's a good medication. Similar to that, another question is, should you be taking Ozempic for issues other than diabetes, for example, to save it for people who need it? So Ozempic is a medication. I mean, it's advertised everywhere. There were shortages previously in the past. There no longer are shortages. So this concept of we need to save medications for the people that are actually diabetic. I think if people are really trying to pursue weight loss, and that's something that's important to their health, everyone should have access to the medication. So there isn't a shortage anymore. So I'm less concerned about that, but I think, it is effective for a lot of different other issues. And then how much does walking after eating help to burn off sugars? So pretty much entirely. That is almost the only way to burn off sugar. Because when you think of it, when you're physically moving, and we'll even go over an example of how many calories you burn by picking blueberries, right? So the calories that's when you have high sugars like that, you physically burn because your muscles need that sugar and that energy, right? So in order to physically move, you're using the extra stores that you don't need. You're depleting the extra stores of fat that's just sort of sitting there, and you're using it up. So walking right after eating is actually extremely helpful. Some people are like, oh, I'm so bloated, I don't want to walk around. But that's actually the perfect way to start utilizing, because otherwise it just sits there, right? Especially when it's a high calorie meal. Don't go away from this talk thinking that I'm advising you to count calories, because I highly advise against that. I think about what you eat. Be mindful of what you eat. Enjoy what you eat. And really try and go back to our traditional ways of food and Mijam, our traditional food, right? I think of how our diets used to be when we just lived off the land and we were very healthy. And with more things being processed, it's not as good, but whatever you can afford is good. Just keep trying to go with that. I do know that, for folks that are located within Thunder Bay, Onwa has a good food box. So if you are struggling to get healthy produce, that is something where you can contact the centralized intake, let them know about that, and they can try and help connect you so that you can be getting more, fresh produce and things like that, at a cost that's not super, super high, as the cost is increasing. And another question we had is, if I have multiple warning signs, but my blood work is normal, should I still worry about potentially having diabetes? My question and my thought for that is, if you have a family history of diabetes, then I do think it's worth still considering. I don't want it to be looming on you where you're just nonstop thinking about that. But also, if it's in your family history, then yeah, I think getting your blood work once a year just to make sure, then that would probably be a good way to go about it. At physician and nurse practitioners' offices, we don't really do like the annual physical exam has gone by the wayside just because they've proven that it's not effective. It's better and more effective for healthcare for people to come with issues as they have them versus trying to seek issues. There's basic things that we do like cancer screening, which happens, but really just when you have a concern, do your best to try and address it with a healthcare provider. Don't sit on things for a very long time where you're like, maybe it's normal, especially if it's any of those things that I mentioned at the beginning. Okay. Any questions? Any more questions? I think that's pretty well it. So feel free to keep asking them. I will keep reading them and keep answering them. So we talked about this. Stress, the signal being sent is exactly the same, even when the danger is maybe not necessarily the same. How our communities are impacted because of colonization and the ultimate danger, which was assimilation and death. So an estimated 80 to 90% of people with type 2 diabetes are overweight or suffer from obesity. So I think that's something to consider because stress equals weight gain. Oftentimes when people are trying to lose weight and they're like, I can, no matter what I do. I'm like, are you in counseling? Do you have a really stressful job? Do you have a really stressful life? What do you do to control your stress? And they're like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm like, well, high and sustained levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, it affects the fat distribution. So essentially, fat getting stored around your organs is actually a lot worse than the quote unquote fat that you see on obesity, when you're like, oh, I have a double chin, or you have a little bit of pudge on your stomach. That's actually not considered dangerous fat. You may not like it because of what society tells you is the ideal beauty standard, but your body is beautiful and important. But that's not actually what's dangerous. What's dangerous is when you have a lot of visceral fat, which is fat that's surrounding your organs, right? Because then those organs get inflamed. So your brain interprets stress. It signals to your adrenal gland, release adrenaline and cortisol. What happens when you have a bunch of adrenaline and cortisol? Your pancreas is like, okay, give us sugar, quick, quick, quick. Your pancreas becomes tired. There's lots of extra storage floating around because you didn't actually need all of that sugar, right? In order to respond to that stressful phone call, you didn't actually need a whole dump of tons of sugar because that wasn't actually that big of a danger. But your body and your brain interpreted it as such. So if we get better at the ways that we interpret stress and the ways we respond to stress, we will have less weight gain. We will have less prevalence of diabetes within our communities. Okay. And so this is an image of what I'm talking about in terms of when people talk about body fat, or adipose tissue is the medical word for that. So visceral fat, you can see, is the one with the red unsmiley face. So you can see lots of the yellow, which is the fatty tissue. It's around that person's heart, their bowels, right? So that's why when you see people and sometimes they have, I don't know what people might call a beer belly. Have you ever heard of that term? That's where people are super, super rounded and you're like, why is this happening? But then everywhere else, nowhere else has fat, just that part of their stomach. What's happening is usually because of alcohol consumption or other reasons. People can develop liver cirrhosis without drinking. That's not the only cause of liver cirrhosis, but it's that yellow fat that's sitting around there that's causing the inflammation, because alcoholic drinks are just a bunch of sugar. So it's excess sugar that you're drinking. Your body's like, we don't know what to do with this. We've utilized it. All the hotels are closed. We don't know what to do. So then it stores it around. And that's why people get that really protruded look to them. So that's actually more dangerous than, like, I don't know, me, like my little chunk at the bottom here, my little roll, right? Like that's actually not, maybe you don't like it, but so there is some risk to it, but it's not as scary and as concerning as the other side. So that's really what you need to be worried about, is when excess sugar is now being stored around your organs, all of those organs become inflamed. And so then they start to misfunction, right? They start to have dysfunction. Even when I think of, look at all that yellow around those bowels. You know, when people, when they have severe stomach pain, people diabetes, what's happening? One, there's a lot of fat around their bowels, but also two, they're getting something called gastroparesis. That's where, because your nerves and your blood vessels are so affected by the sugar, you're not even moving things the way you need to. So people get so backed up, so constipated, because the nerves and the blood vessels that are in charge of moving stuff through your bowels, it can't even do that. And it's so inflamed now because there's all this extra fat around it. So it really affects all parts of your body, and it's all linked. And just bringing it back to the example that I gave, where, diabetes in our community can really be linked to colonization. It's not to make people feel hopeless, like, well, if that's what it caused it, then like I'm crap out of luck, because colonization has not and likely will not stop. But the reason why I frame things in this way is for you to realize that maybe there were some personal choices maybe that you made that contribute to it, but that is likely like 1% of what gave you diabetes. So this game of self-blame of like, oh, I caused my diabetes because, I did this, and this. Well, if we look at like a stress response, right? If you're going to drink some chips and pop, why? Well, because I have food insecurity and it's cheaper to buy and eat junk food. Why? Well, because my hunting lines were disrupted. I actually can't even hunt. Why? Because those things were outlawed by the Canadian government. Why? Because that was the process of colonization, right? So every sort of what we would consider personal action of like, oh, well, you are doing this thing, you're doing this, you're making it worse, is all links back. Right? So we have to think about it in that sense, to be kind to ourselves when we have these conditions, and to treat them, and really, as healthcare providers, getting to the root cause of this, right? Like in our communities, that's the issue. So telling people, hey, stop drinking pops and chips, and you're like, well, that's not actually the original problem. That's not actually what's going on here. What we need in order to treat diabetes is to have food sovereignty, have access to our traditional lands that are safe, clean, and well taken care of, be able to harvest our own meat, be able to, all of these things. Those are the things that are going to treat diabetes from a higher level, not this like personal, like individualized approach of like, well, change what you do. No, change how our society is structured. Let Indigenous people be self-determining. Self-determining means you get to make choices, and we do, because this is our land. And we never signed over our self-determination. So that's just something to consider. Like, food sovereignty will help us treat diabetes. Another example. So if we are feeling the stress response of, nothing is safe, I can't trust anyone. I mean, that probably resonates with a lot of people. Nothing is safe, I can't trust anyone. Well, why do you think that way? Well, it was passed down because of generations of silence. It's a taboo topic. This is just something that's not talked about in our community, and I just don't feel safe. I can't trust anyone. Why? Well, because behavior was learned and it was normal and experienced, for example, things like sexual abuse or physical abuse or violence, right? Well, why was that normalized? Where did that come from? Displacement in residential schools. Where did residential schools come from? That was a process of colonization to assimilate Indigenous people. So, right? What I say, treating stress and intergenerational trauma will improve obesity and type 2 diabetes. That's just a fact. Treating stress and intergenerational trauma will improve obesity and type 2 diabetes. So making that investment into your self-care. So it's not just this like, I don't know, wooey, like take care of yourself. It'll make things better. No, that actually, one, will heal our ancestors, that will heal your family, that will break cycles of intergenerational trauma. And then we won't have situations where we're stuck, with this thought, nothing is safe, I can't. I can't trust anyone. Then we start to address those things, which are a key, a stressor, something that's stressing in your lives. Why do people have stress in their lives? Because of violence, all types of reasons, right? So taking care of yourself and really addressing those things, it will improve obesity and type 2 diabetes. And that's what we as Indigenous people should be focusing on, returning to our roots and how we used to do things all in time immemorial, and going back to our traditional ways is going to actually be what treats type 2 diabetes. So next here, this is, here, I'm going to go back here. Patients, so this is something that comes from DBT or CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. Those are essentially just ways for people to be able to respond to the stress. Remember how I said the stress signal is the same signal regardless of what the stress is? Well, CBT and DBT are proven therapeutic ways of counseling, ways of trying to, problem solve that can actually help you so that you experience things and they're not as stressful. So this is, so patients may not have caused all their problems, but they have to solve them anyway. And that's why I talk about, everything is linked to colonization, but I don't want people to feel powerless, because regardless of the fact that you did not create residential schools, you did not create these problems in your family, create silence and stress, which then contributed to, X, Y, and Z, but we have to solve them anyways because they're prevalent in our lives. And so this requires radical acceptance. It's not possible to solve a problem that we have not accepted, and it puts blame aside. And that's not to say we put Canada, the blame aside to them and the continued and ongoing process, but in order to move forward, that we do, and to be able to respond to the stressors that continue to be in our lives, we do need to have some form of radical acceptance and emotional wellness, right? All of the cycles of the medicine wheel. So emotional wellness, going to a sweat lodge, sweat out, sadness and trauma. You'd be like, well, how does that treat diabetes? Well, I'll go into this, but just by being in a sweat lodge, if you're sweating, your body doesn't know that it's not cardio activity, but it's sweating and it's working. Your heart is pumping. You're burning off sugar. When you are in a sweat lodge, you are burning off sugar because of sweat, right? And then there are spiritual and traditional practices that we talk about of, like, you go to healing ceremonies to get rid of sickness and to let out sickness and trauma. Sweat lodges might not be your practice. You might do things like longhouses, all kinds of different things. You might go to a church, whatever that is, but taking care of your emotional wellness will improve your type 2 diabetes. Speaking to an elder or a family member you trust, right? Talking to people that can actually help you and listen. That picture, light up the sage, so the thing that we did, because when you speak to medicines, plants, right, everything is animate, everything is alive, everything is connected. When you speak physically to plants and you let the smoke rise up from whatever it is that you're burning, all that thought and all that prayer that you've put goes right up to Creator. That's where smoke goes, right? That's how things are communicated. That's how we let go of sadness and pain and fear. Sit by water, matig, a tree, or nibe by water, talk to it. What's on your mind? And so, like, some people are like, well, that sounds kind of nuts. Like, you're just going to go and sit by a tree and talk to it. I literally do this all the time. Because, like I say, everything is animate, everything is alive, and those are our spirit relations. If we're all my relations, what that means is that we're all connected, we're all equal, and that's why those things have been put on Turtle Island. Water, plant medicine, life, all of that stuff is to actually help you. So utilize it, talk to those things. Something else to consider is that non-insured health benefits, for all the things that I dislike about them, they do cover a decent amount of counseling per year. So if you have a status card, they cover 22 sessions per year. You get more coverage of sessions if you are related to or someone in your family is a residential school survivor. And it's quite easy to renew. So this is something where I'm like, do counseling. And you're like, people are like, I don't have problems. I don't want to talk about it. Like, we need to, because that's what's sitting in us. That's what's causing sickness in a spiritual sense, but also the cortisol, which is then turning into sugar and obesity and diabetes. Like, I'm talking in both ways at this point. And so where can you get counseling? I mean, lots of people will say, like, hey, it's quite limited in terms of being able to be covered. So what can we actually do? And so, like I say, 22 sessions every year, easily renewable. every year. And simple things, like there's this site, it's called Psychology Today. This is actually what it's like, and you can Google providers that are NIHB covered, meaning they're not going to charge you out of pocket. They're going to bill it to NIHB, who will then pay for it, right? So even if you live in Timmins, you are in one of our chapters in Tyendinaga First Nation, right? All of these things are virtual. Counseling, ideally, you know, if it's virtual or not, it's still something to start working on those things. And you know, these are, you can look this up. Hey, is this person NIHB covered? You can even like look and click through their website, like what do these people look like, what are the things that they practice in. And there's lots of examples like Psychology Today. This is just one example of like where I refer patients to be like, hey man, look for a counselor. Like there's an NIHB one here, I know there is. Find one that you like, look through their photos, read their stuff, contact them. Because that's something that they are able to do, that's something they're able to help with. And so even if, because this is what I hear all the time, I don't want to go to counseling because I don't want to talk about my past. And I completely understand and can see why this would be a concern. Like people want to leave what they have experienced in the past. But what I say to people is you don't actually need to talk about the past in order to heal, because you can focus on the present and create skills to have less suffering, right? So maybe you don't want to talk about things that have happened, and that's your right? Like healing is not linear. Feel free to do whatever it is you need to do to talk through things. I'm of the perspective that you do need to unearth things in order to metabolize and process them. Otherwise, they just sit in your body, and then that's how they turn into cancer. That's my whole other theory as an Anishinaabe physician, which I could do a whole talk about, you know, because no one can pinpoint a cause as to cancer. Why are there certain cancers? Why is it so prevalent in Indigenous communities? Because they don't talk about their trauma, because trauma is stored. Your body thinks something is wrong. It's autoimmune. It starts to attack itself, and it's sickness, right? That's why I think cancer is extremely prevalent in our communities. That and environmental damage, being close to so many mercury poison, you know, like where industry is placed is very strategic. But I don't want to go to counseling because I don't want to talk about my past, and you don't need to, but you can have less suffering. That in and of itself is healing generational trauma. Having less suffering than your grandma, than your great-grandma, than your great-grandmother, those are such honorable and beautiful things to pursue and to do and to try and work towards. So this is an example of the DBT Therapy Skills Workbook. I don't know, not a book that I get paid to advertise, but one that I've utilized a lot with patients. I print handouts from this. And you know that dialectical behavioral therapy, which is really just a bunch of coping skills that you think that you're good at, but guarantee you're not. One, I know because I did DBT. I am a physician, folks. I've gone to school for over 10 years in order to become a physician, and processing and identifying emotions is actually not a skill I had. And I didn't learn that until I was 30 years old. So if at least 3 of these statements apply to you, then counseling and or having skills to deal with your suffering is going to help. I seem to feel emotions more easily or intensely than other people. A reason to do counseling. The smallest things can change my mood or ruin my day. I feel like I can't control myself when I'm upset about something. Things in my life often feel overwhelming. I struggle to motivate myself to get things done. My relationships have a lot of conflicts or ups and downs. I struggle with feeling emotionally safe in relationships. I feel as if I'm constantly living my life on autopilot. My opinions about myself, other people, or my life change a lot. Sometimes I can't help but feeling hopeless about my future. I engage in impulsive behaviors that harm me or other people. I don't have as many coping skills as I want. So this isn't like a character judgment of like, oh, you don't know how to identify your emotions and you're this many years old. No. But because you weren't taught those things, because if you weren't parented that way, because you didn't have parents that were able to do that because they did not learn those skills, then you won't have developed these. If you did not have secure attachment as a child, you actually could not have developed these skills. And so this is why you need to take it upon yourself to go and do this for your family, for yourself, for your kids, so that you can teach them how to do these things. So I highly recommend DBT, whether you're doing handouts yourself, whether you're going to see a provider about them, whether you're going to see counseling. I just think it's really the way to move forward, because it's not like, tell me all of your trauma. It's like, okay, well, if the smallest thing can change your mood or ruin your day, that's a cognitive distortion. What can you do to change that? Well, there are actually actual tools that you can use to do that and have less suffering. This is another example, the self-care medicine wheel. So it's something that at the strawberrymedicine.com. So this is an Indigenous woman who created this self-care medicine wheel, which is pretty much like this DBT, but Indigenous form, which is why I love it and why I talk about it. Practicing our culture will improve obesity and type 2 diabetes, right? So my main takeaway points for you is that practicing our culture will improve obesity and type 2 diabetes, as will working on your own self-determination, as will, really just trying to focus on your own emotional, physical, spiritual, mental wellness. All of those things, by working on any of those things, you are inherently treating diabetes. Diabetes treatment isn't just taking your metformin. It's also like helping, when you're experiencing caregiver burnout because maybe you babysit all of your grandkids because the parents aren't around, and you need additional help. That's seeking help to like do certain things so that you're not as stressed, because stress is the thing that really like kills us, literally. So something as simple as blueberry picking, Minan picking. So one, this is, okay, I don't know if I'm pretty sure everyone here has probably picked blueberries. Picking blueberries is extremely taxing. My grandparents do this every summer for days on end. I literally can do this for an hour before I'm done. I'm like, I am so done with this. Like, I'm hot, there's bugs. It's very, very active. So one, the physical activity of doing such, you burn calories. Two, blueberries are rich in antioxidants. Antioxidants, that's just like means that that you're not like, because there's pollution in the air, there's all of these things in the environment that are always like essentially trying to like attack internal processes in your body. Antioxidants means like it's helping prevent pollution and things in the environment from attacking your body. So that's why eating blueberries is really effective. Blueberry leaf tea, like I talked about, can stabilize and reduce blood sugars. And thiacins. So that's actually an ingredient within blueberries that protects against retinopathy or degeneration of your retina. So your eye has this big old nerve at the back of it called your retina. That's what this picture is here. And it actually, remember, because the diabetes affects small blood vessels like in your eyes, there is parts of blueberries that will actually help prevent the degeneration of that nerve so that your eyes don't become blurry. And then there's even like when people say, that's why blueberries are you'll probably notice most superfoods are usually indigenous foods in the world, like wild rice blueberries, like things that, and like that's because our ancestors had it figured out. They had it figured out. So eating blueberries, antioxidants, cancer prevention, because again, this delphinidin, that's a type of enzyme that's within blueberries that inhibits new growth of blood vessels that feed growing tumors. So if you have cancer, in order for tumors to grow, you need blood vessels that feed that tumor. Blueberry literally has ingredients that inhibit the growth of new blood vessels. So culturally, a food that we have access to in terms of, being in the bush, like things that we could eat, things that are, at least for Anishinaabe people in Northwestern Ontario area, that were within our diets, are extremely helpful. They will help with diabetes and their cancer prevention. The physical activity, right? If it's you burn 51 calories in 30 minutes of picking fruit off of trees, picking fruits or vegetables with moderate effort, right? So calories, and so the maximum, what can happen is the calories burned in 1 hour of picking blueberries could be up to as high as 302 calories. Just for an hour of doing that. And I think of, the question that we had earlier about exercise, like, is that actually going to help you burn off sugar? Yes, it also stimulates your pancreas. Remember that little yellow thing in the center of your body that's working really hard to regulate everything? The pancreas is going to release glucagon. Remember the little guy with the scissors that's cutting up the sugar that we have? And so it's like, great. These extra things that you made me store that I really don't want to because they're dangerous for you, you can use them right now to do this cultural activity. Be on the land, be connected to the land, talk with the medicines, blueberry pick, to actually help prevent some of these things. Yeah, so this is an example of like the calories that it could potentially, that you would be using up by doing something as simple as this. glucagon. It's like, hey, thank you so much for doing this traditional activity and using up that extra bag of chips that we did not need. Thank you so much, right? And then manomen, or wild rice. So wild rice in and of itself has a lot of health benefits. First of all, it's an excellent source of plant-based protein. It has a low glycemic index. What does that mean? So essentially, when people have prediabetes, diabetes, what glycemic index is a way that all foods and drinks are classified. So it's a scale of 100, right? This glycemic index, which is like how much sugar or how much carbs comes out of the thing that you're eating, right? Because carbs, certain food and drinks that increase your carbs, they raise your blood sugars like immediately after being consumed. So usually the more highly processed a food is, the quicker it's digested, the quicker the sugar is released, and then the higher of a spike and then a crash that you will have. So like, for example, McDonald's has a very high glycemic index, right? That's why you feel great, you have energy, and then an hour later you're like, man, I feel like crap. And that's because it has a high glycemic index. Manomen has a glycemic index of 57. That's considered extremely low. That's very low. So anything that's 55 or less is going to help stabilize your blood sugar because it's protein and it's foods that's going to stay in you for longer. And so then the energy of it is going to be distributed. Instead of your pancreas dealing with all these highs and lows, it's actually just stable throughout the day. And your pancreas is like, thank you so much for eating protein and things with a low glycemic index, because now I don't need to respond to your stressful eating patterns, So even if you Google low glycemic index diet, it'll give you a list of a bunch of things that are low in this. A scale of 0 to 100, obviously 100 is the worst, 0 is the best, but some of our own traditional foods and things that we can harvest, if we have access to it, this is actually very beneficial. Powwow season, okay? Well, when you go to a powwow, what do? Well, you sing and dance and you're with community. So there's probably about 3 different ways that this is treating diabetes. So 1, you can burn up to 200 to 400 calories with just half an hour of continuous dancing. Okay, so that's like if you were at a powwow and you danced for that long, that's how many calories you're burning. 1, you're participating in culture, right? People usually dance within powwows because they're, connecting to culture. They're dancing for their ancestors, for their families. There's a spiritual connection as to why people powwow dance. You're also burning calories. The vagus nerve, which is a very helpful nerve in your body that helps control stress, it's connected to your vocal cords and the muscles in the back of your throat. So when you sing, that's why people feel so good and happy when they sing, is because and relaxed, because the vagus nerve is attached to your vocal cords. So whenever that vibration is happening, because you're drumming, because you're singing, what's happening is you're stimulating that vagus nerve, which is telling your body, hey, settle down, calm down. It tells your parasympathetic nervous system to kick in, which is the rest and digest. Rest and digest. Stop being panicked, right? So the vagus nerve, there's almost like life hacks of like, if you even look up vagus nerve and how to stimulate it in order to help with stress, because it's that's what it's known for. That's what it does. So simply just, singing in and of itself, right? There's the mental benefit of it being attached to a nerve that will help you physically feel calmer, okay? Vagus nerve is connected to your pancreas. Of course, everything is. So when the vagus nerve is stimulated, it actually helps strengthen your pancreas and it prevents the over-fatiguing. I think of the vagus nerve as like actually giving support to things. When you're dancing at a powwow, you're staying hydrated. That water is so important to physically be able to move your body. Something to consider: when you have diabetes, you're at higher risk of becoming dehydrated quickly, so you should be drinking lots of water and a bit, and that's good medicine for us. But there's infinite number of ways that something as simple as like powwow season and dancing, singing, or even being at a powwow helps treat diabetes. There's probably about 15 different ways. What about a sweat lodge? So we talked about that. So 1, you're connecting to spirituality, praying for your family. All of these things decrease cortisol, the stress hormone, the signal that's being sent to your brain that's saying like, hey, everything's stressful. Something to consider when you have diabetes, right, is to always try and eat a small snack before going. So just because sweating can actually sometimes be a sign of low sugars. So sometimes when people start to feel really sweaty and shaky, that's a sign of low sugars. So I think it's good to still have snacks prepared, but being able to sweat physically, that's using your body. Fishing, go, fish. So the act of fishing, why does that treat diabetes? One, fish is a good source of protein. It makes you feel full faster, right? So you're nice and stabilized. Your sugars are nice and stabilized. So you're less over likely to eat. You're less likely to reach for that quick sugar like a chocolate bar because you'll be full because you'll have eaten all of this beautiful fish. Fish have good omega-3 fatty acids and HDL. Remember how I talked about how there's good cholesterol and then there's bad cholesterol? Well, HDL is pretty much the opposite of LDL and triglycerides, the thing that is bad that clogs your arteries. Fish actually have the good cholesterol. That's the good fat. That's the fat that actually helps clear cholesterol that's currently chilling in your arteries right now. Like it actually, you need fat in your body. So don't do some weird diet where now there's no fat. You physically need that for your brain health and for your body. But fishing is also so active. Like, I mean, you're sitting there, but sweating in the sun all day, like just the cognitive process of trying to do that, people feel really relaxed when they go fishing and excited too when they catch something. So there's so many diabetic improvements that could be made by just as simple as going out on the land and fishing and eating fish. Of course, many of our lakes have high levels of contamination like mercury and PCPs. So do eat fish in a moderation based off of if your community is impacted by those things. Because fish are able to, because they feed off of other things, the intensity of high levels of contamination, essentially, like they keep building. And then that's why fish have so much, quantity of it. So that's why I say think about your region. And, there are limits on how much fish that we can eat based off of the chemical pollutants. So just be aware of that. But also do what you can to be on the land. So what can you commit to today? Right? We talked about so many things. Kwijak, Odea, your heart. Like your body, what can you actually, because it starts with one small step. People will say, oh, that's insignificant. You don't need to do whole overhauls of your life. I never recommend that because it's not effective. But really, like, what can you walk away and say that you're going to do today to either prevent diabetes, to treat diabetes if you currently have it, or to help it from getting worse? I will drink one less pop every day. Perfect. That's an amazing commitment. I will walk every day for just 10 minutes. The standard in terms of the exercise guidelines for Diabetes Canada is like 150 minutes per week. Doesn't matter. 10 minutes of washing the dishes, good. Then you exerted yourself. Anything that's moderate effort is good. Just keep your body active. I will speak about my mental health with someone who's trusted once per week. That's a great step in order to commit to prevent diabetes. I will pick one vegetable I may be interested in and eat it once a week. Maybe it's something that comes from the fresh produce box that Alma can help, get sorted for you. I will eat one piece of fruit a day. I will drink 1 cup of water a day, right? Stay hydrated. I will smoke 1 less cigarette a day. So these are really just what can you commit to today, thinking of those really small steps. Because when those things are addressed and we think of our health holistically in all of those regions, body, mind, spirit, heart, like we are treating type 2 diabetes. We're treating type 1 diabetes. We're actually also just helping with the longevity of our communities, right? We want people to actually need people to live long enough to be elders. Our age life expectancy rates relative to other Canadians is a huge difference, a drastic difference, right? Native people don't live as long as non-Indigenous people. So we have to do this work. We have to take up this work, and whatever that is, just really start somewhere, because it will make a huge difference. Okay, so that's everything. That's all I have for content. We can check if there's any questions. Outside of that, Jade's going to remind you about the survey, and we'll wrap it up. Oh, great. Okay, let me see here. I think we did answer the Ozempic questions, was like if it was good or bad. I say it's a really helpful drug and it treats a lot of things, was the summary of that. Okay, and I think that was everything. Any other questions, folks, in any of the chats? Can you check that really quick? Okay, we're good. Awesome. So I will now pass it over to Jade.
All right, so there will be a survey link sent out, and then your name will be entered if you answer it for this prize. So there's a couple goodie things in here, water bottle,
Fleece blanket.
there's like a blanket, I think a candle, so a ton of good stuff. The surveys just really help us gain your feedback so that we can continue doing these women health talks, and just kind of gives us some education towards what you guys kind of would like to hear, and just some other feedback.
Oh my gosh, I'm just looking at this package. It also has monomen. It actually has wild rice, the thing that I was just talking about. It also has the 4 Sacred Medicines book and our tea recipe, and also a little cucumber. Okay, this is a great prize. And it has a cookbook. Okay, fill out the survey. Complete the survey. Give us your feedback.
Definitely.
This is a great one, because it's a great prize. 2, because we also just really want your feedback to make this as good as we can. Okay, folks, so the next Indigenous Women's Health Talk series is, when is it? Can we announce that? Do you know? I don't actually know. I should, because I'll be presenting. Okay, well, it's next month. We do it every month, so sometime in December. So just watch our social media pages, and we'll be able to just send that off to you, and join us for some more topics. Okay. Awesome. So we'll keep the live stream open just for a bit long, and have the links there. So please, and you have, I think, up to like 2 days. Usually the survey stays open for 2 days. So even if you want to think about things and come back to it, you still can. The survey will still be available. Then we'll see you hopefully next month. Thanks so much. Miigwech, everyone. Okay. Oh, December 17th is the date we've been given. Great. See you then.